The crystal chandelier above my parents' dining table cast shadows across 23 faces, all turned toward me with varying degrees of contempt. Thanksgiving at the Morrison estate had always been a performance, but this year's production featured me as the evening's entertainment, specifically as the punchline. "Emma, darling," my mother began, her voice dripping with the particular condescension she'd perfected over 37 years of marriage to old money, "perhaps you could explain to everyone how your little, what do you call it, consulting job, how that qualifies you to lecture your father about strategic investments." I took a measured sip of wine. A 2015 Chateau Margaux that I happened to know cost $850 per bottle. The same vintage sat in my own cellar, purchased by the case. "I wasn't lecturing, Mother. Dad asked my opinion on the Thompson merger." "Asked out of politeness," my father interjected, dabbing his mouth with a linen napkin. Gregory Morrison, CEO of Morrison Luxury Developments, wielded his dismissiveness like a scalpel. "You work in data entry, sweetheart. It's hardly relevant experience." My cousin Bradley snorted into his Manhattan. "Data entry. At least it's honest work, unlike pretending to be a business consultant on LinkedIn." He made air quotes with his perfectly manicured fingers and half the table chuckled. I smiled and said nothing. 7 years ago I'd stopped correcting them. Let them believe I spent my days in a cubicle, typing numbers into spreadsheets for a mid-level firm in Seattle. The truth, that I was the anonymous managing partner of Vertex Capital Group, controlling a $2.3 billion portfolio across 17 industries, wasn't something they needed to know. Yet. "Speaking of business," my Aunt Catherine announced, her third glass of wine making her bold, "Richard and I are expanding the restaurant chain. 6 new locations next year. Perhaps Emma could apply for a hostess position? It would be more appropriate than this consultant fantasy." "Catherine, please," my mother said, but her smile betrayed her amusement. "Emma has her little job. We shouldn't embarrass her." My younger sister Vanessa, golden child and CFO of Morrison Luxury Developments, leaned back in her chair with a satisfied smirk. "You know what's funny? Emma tried to give me advice last month. About corporate restructuring. Can you imagine?" She looked around the table, collecting laughs like tribute. "I have an MBA from Wharton. She has a bachelor's degree in sociology. But sure, tell me how to run a business." "Sociology," Bradley repeated, shaking his head. "What do you even do with that? Besides, apparently, data entry and delusions of grandeur." I cut into my duck breast, perfectly prepared by my parents' private chef. The meat was tender, expensive, wasted on people who couldn't taste anything beyond their own self-importance. "How is the Thompson merger progressing, Dad?" His jaw tightened. "That's proprietary information, Emma. Not appropriate dinner conversation." "Of course," I said softly. "I just wondered because Thompson Commercial Real Estate has been hemorrhaging value since their Singapore expansion failed. Their Asian markets division lost $340 million last quarter. But I'm sure you've reviewed their third-quarter forensic audit." The table went quiet. My father's face darkened. "How do you know that?" I smiled. "Industry publications. I like to stay informed, even if I'm just doing data entry." "Reading Forbes doesn't make you a businesswoman," Vanessa snapped. "It makes you someone who reads Forbes. There's a difference." My mother stood, signaling the transition to dessert with the precision of a conductor. "Let's move to the sitting room, shall we? Emma, perhaps you could help clear the table? I'm sure you're more comfortable with that than all this business talk." 23 people migrated toward the east wing like a flock of exceptionally well-dressed birds. I remained seated, finishing my wine. Through the doorway I heard my father's voice, embarrassing honestly. At her age still playing pretend. When I was 35, I'd already doubled the company's market value. "She gets it from your sister," my mother replied. "Linda was always a dreamer too. Look how that turned out." Aunt Linda, who died 5 years ago with $47 million in the bank from a tech startup sale. But they didn't know about that either. Linda had trusted me with everything. Her estate, her investment strategies, her final wish that I use her money to build something extraordinary. Vertex Capital Group was Linda's legacy as much as mine. In the sitting room, coffee service had been arranged on the antique sideboard. I accepted a cup from the server, who gave me a sympathetic smile. She'd been serving at Morrison events for 6 years. I'd tripled her salary when she'd confided about her daughter's medical bills, funneling the money through an anonymous charitable trust. She knew who I was. She'd never say, "Emma, my Uncle Richard called from his position near the fireplace. Catherine mentioned you might benefit from an introduction to our restaurant suppliers. Good steady work. Better than whatever you're doing now." "That's kind of you," I said. "But I'm quite satisfied with my current position." Bradley laughed, a harsh sound that bounced off the vaulted ceilings. "Current position. That's adorable. Mom, Dad, we should hire her for Bradley and Associates. We need someone to organize our files. It would be charity work, really. Family helping family." Bradley graduated summa cum laude from Princeton, Aunt Catherine announced to no one in particular. Top of his class in business administration. He understands these things. I sipped my coffee. Bradley and Associates, a mid-tier investment firm that had posted $2.3 million in profits last year. Respectable. Unremarkable. I'd made $2.3 million on a single pharmaceutical stock trade last Tuesday. "Emma, honey," my mother began, settling into her favorite chair like a queen assuming her throne, "your father and I have been discussing something. A proposition, if you will." Here it came. I'd been waiting for this all evening. "We're concerned," she continued. "You're 35, unmarried, working a job that clearly isn't fulfilling. We think it might be time for you to come work for Morrison Luxury Developments. Something entry-level, naturally. Administrative support, perhaps. At least then you'd be learning from the best." Vanessa's smile was shark-like. "We could use someone to handle scheduling, vendor coordination. Nothing too complicated. You'd report to me, obviously, but it would give you real business experience. Better than pretending on social media." "I don't post about business on social media," I said quietly. "Exactly," my father boomed. "Because you know you'd be exposed as a fraud. At least you have that much self-awareness." 23 faces watched me, waiting for capitulation. They always waited for capitulation. Emma, the family disappointment, finally accepting her place in the natural order. I was saved from responding by my phone vibrating. The screen showed a number I recognized immediately. James Chin, president of Pacific First Bank. I let it go to voicemail. "Was that important?" my mother asked, her tone suggesting nothing in my life could possibly be important. "Just work," I said. Bradley guffawed. "Work calling on Thanksgiving? What, did someone need you to input data urgently?" The phone rang again. James Chin didn't call twice unless it was critical. I glanced at the screen, then at my family's expectant faces. "Excuse me, I should take this." "Emma, we're in the middle of a family conversation," my father said sternly. "It will just take a moment." I answered before he could protest further. "Hello. Ms. Morrison." James Chen's voice was tight with stress. "I apologize for calling on a holiday, but we have a situation that requires your immediate attention. The Morrison Luxury Developments account, your investment specifically, there's been a wire transfer request initiated for the full amount. $95 million to be withdrawn and transferred to your primary holding account. Our automated system flagged it for executive confirmation given the size. Did you authorize this transaction?" I hadn't. But someone had access they shouldn't have. Kept my voice level. "Can you tell me who initiated the transfer?" "It came through your verified channels, ma'am. All the security protocols were properly executed. But given the size and timing, our fraud prevention system requires verbal confirmation from you directly. Should we proceed with the withdrawal?" The room had gone quiet. 23 pairs of eyes fixed on me, some curious, most contemptuous. "James," I said loud enough for everyone to hear, "just to confirm, you're calling about my $95 million investment in Morrison Luxury Developments?" My mother's coffee cup froze halfway to her lips. "Yes, ma'am," James replied. "Your investment through the Vertex Capital Group holding structure. The anonymous investor position you established 3 years ago. As per your standing instructions, Morrison Luxury Developments has never been informed of your identity as their primary investor. Should we maintain that confidentiality or should I proceed with?" "Hold on the transfer," I said. "I need to verify something first. I'll call you back within the hour." I ended the call and set my phone on the coffee table. The silence was exquisite. My father found his voice first. What was that about?" "Bank matters," I said, reaching for my coffee. My hand didn't shake. Years of high-stakes negotiations had taught me perfect composure. Nothing that concerns anyone here. You said $95 million, Vanessa whispered, her face pale. You said, Morrison Luxury Developments. I smiled. Did I? I must have misspoken. Emma. My father stood, his 6'3" frame suddenly less imposing. That call. What was that about? Business, I said simply. But you've made it clear I don't know the first thing about business, so I'm sure it's nothing worth discussing. Bradley's laugh was nervous now. Come on, Emma. Stop playing games. What did that banker want? My mother's hand trembled as she set down her cup. Gregory, Morrison Luxury Developments has an anonymous investor. $95 million. We've never been able to identify them. They came in 3 years ago during the liquidity crisis. They saved the company. The liquidity crisis. I remembered it well. My father had mortgaged everything, overextended on the Dubai project, and found himself 48 hours from bankruptcy. An anonymous investor had appeared, offering $95 million in exchange for a 35% non-voting equity position and 3 seats on the advisory board, which they'd never filled. The money had saved Morrison Luxury Developments, allowed them to complete Dubai, and financed the expansion that had made them the toast of the industry. My father had spent 3 years trying to identify his mysterious benefactor. He'd hired investigators, lawyers, forensic accountants. The trail always went cold at Vertex Capital Group, a private investment firm with an opaque ownership structure and a reputation for anonymity. That's impossible, my father said, but his voice lacked conviction. Emma, tell me that call wasn't about our company. I met his eyes. Why would it matter? I'm just someone who does data entry. Remember? Vanessa lunged for my phone. I moved it calmly out of reach. Don't be childish. Show us the call log, she demanded. Prove that wasn't what it sounded like. I don't need to prove anything, I said. You've all made your opinions of me quite clear. I'm unqualified, unemployed in any meaningful sense, playing pretend at business. So obviously that call couldn't have been what you think it was. My Uncle Richard had gone very still. Gregory, what percentage of Morrison Luxury Developments does the anonymous investor control? 35%, my father said mechanically. With liquidation preferences that give them effective control in certain circumstances. What circumstances? I asked, curious to see if he knew. If the company's quarterly revenue drops below specified thresholds, or if certain debt ratios are exceeded, or if... He trailed off, understanding dawning across his face. If leadership makes decisions that materially harm shareholder value without investor approval. I nodded. Those are standard protective provisions. Any competent investor would insist on them. You, my mother breathed. Phew. It's been you this whole time. The room erupted. Voices overlapped, accusations and denials and desperate justifications all bleeding together into white noise. I waited, sipping my coffee until my father raised his hand for silence. Enough. His voice cut through the chaos. Emma, I'm asking you directly. Are you our anonymous investor? Do you believe I have the capacity to be? I countered. Because an hour ago you suggested I apply for an administrative assistant position. You said I know nothing about business. You've spent the entire evening mocking my career, my intelligence, my competence. So which is it, Dad? Am I a qualified investor, or am I the family embarrassment? Emma, please, he said, and for the first time in my adult life, I heard genuine fear in Gregory Morrison's voice. Just answer the question. My phone rang again. James Chin, right on schedule. I answered on speaker. Ms. Morrison, I apologize for the urgency, but I need your decision on the transfer. Additionally, our legal team has flagged some concerning activity on the Morrison Luxury Developments account. There appears to be unauthorized access to confidential investor information. We may need to implement emergency protective measures. What kind of protective measures? I asked. Given the attempted unauthorized transfer and potential security breach, we'd recommend freezing all Morrison Luxury Developments operational accounts pending a full audit. This would include payroll, vendor payments, and line of credit access. It's standard protocol when we suspect compromise of major investor accounts. My father's face had gone from red to white. Emma, Whatever you're thinking, don't. I looked at him, this man who'd spent 35 years ensuring I knew my place. James, who authorized you to call me about this? You did, ma'am. 3 years ago, you established protocols requiring executive notification for any transaction over $10 million or any unusual account activity. The attempted withdrawal triggered both flags. And Morrison Luxury Development's operational accounts, they would be frozen when? Immediately upon your authorization. We'd also be required to notify all board members of the security breach and potential investor withdrawal. Vanessa made it sound like a wounded animal. Dad, payroll runs Monday. We have 347 employees. Vendor payments for the Toronto project are due Tuesday. If those accounts freeze. I understand the implications, my father said tersely. Emma, what do you want? Want? I set down my coffee cup. I want what I've always wanted. To be respected. To have my intelligence acknowledged. To be treated like an adult member of this family instead of a disappointment who needs to be managed and pitted. You lied to us, my mother said, her voice shaking. For 3 years you lied. I never lied. You never asked. There's a difference. Bradley had his phone out, fingers flying across the screen. Holy shit. Vertex Capital Group. Real. $2.3 billion in assets under management. Portfolio companies include. Fuck Emma. You own part of everything. Language, Aunt Catherine said automatically, but nobody was listening to her. How? Vanessa demanded. How did you build this? You have a sociology degree and worked in data entry. I have a sociology degree from Stanford which I attended on a full academic scholarship, I corrected. I worked in data analysis, not data entry, for one of the largest hedge funds in the country where I built predictive models for emerging markets. I was promoted 4 times in 3 years. Then Aunt Linda died and left me her estate which I used to launch Vertex Capital Group. That was 7 years ago. Linda left you everything? My mother whispered. We thought she had nothing. You thought she was a failure, I said. But Linda built a multimillion-dollar tech company from scratch, sold it and invested wisely. She left me $47 million and the best business education money can't buy. She also left me something more valuable, the certainty that I didn't need this family's approval to succeed. My father sank back into his chair. The advisory board seats. The 3 seats in the investment agreement that were never filled. I never needed them, I said. The protective provisions were sufficient. And honestly, I preferred to watch from a distance. You run the company well when you're not distracted by family politics and social positioning. The Dubai project, Vanessa said slowly. The expansion into Asia. The Toronto development. Every major decision for 3 years, you could have vetoed. But I didn't, I pointed out. Because despite your low opinion of me, I'm actually quite good at business. I knew those were sound decisions. My investment wasn't about control. It was about helping family when they needed it. Foolish perhaps, but there we are. My phone was still on speaker. James' chin cleared his throat. Ms. Morrison, I do need a decision. I looked around the room. 23 faces, all watching me with new understanding, new fear, new calculation. Already I could see them recalibrating, preparing new approaches, new strategies for managing this unexpected threat. James, about that transfer. Can you tell me who initiated it? The authorization came through channels associated with Ms. Vanessa Morrison, though I should note our investigation is ongoing. Every eye turned to my sister. She'd gone from pale to gray. I was trying to identify the investor. I thought if I could trigger a response. I didn't think it would actually work. The security looked impenetrable. It was, I said. Until you social engineered one of my junior analysts. Rebecca Martinez, I believe. You took her to lunch last week, asked her about her employer, made friends. She mentioned Vertex Capital Group and you went from there. Vanessa didn't deny it. I was trying to protect the company. From what? Competent oversight. I turned back to my phone. James, please proceed with the following. 1. Freeze the unauthorized transfer. 2. Implement additional security protocols on all Morrison Luxury Developments related accounts. 3. Do not freeze operational accounts. The company needs to function. 4. Schedule a call with their board of directors for Monday morning. I think it's time I introduced myself properly. Understood, Ms. Morrison. I'll have the paperwork ready for your review. I ended the call. The silence that followed felt like the aftermath of an earthquake. My father spoke first, his voice carefully controlled. What happens Monday? Monday, I attend my first board meeting as your primary investor. We discuss strategy, review financials, and establish new protocols for family involvement in business operations. You're going to take the company, my mother said flatly. I'm going to protect my investment, I corrected. There's a difference. Despite everything, Morrison Luxury Developments is a sound business with strong fundamentals. I have no interest in destroying it. But things are going to change. What things? Vanessa asked, her CEO confidence crumbling visibly. For starters, nepotism-based hiring practices end immediately. If you want to work for the company, you'll be evaluated on merit like everyone else. Board composition will be restructured to include independent directors. Executive compensation will be tied to performance metrics, not family relationships. And most importantly, strategic decisions will be made based on sound business principles, not social posturing. My Uncle Richard found his voice. You can't just, we have rights. Contracts. Which I'm happy to honor, I said. As long as they serve the company's best interests. But make no mistake, I control 35% of this company with protective provisions that give me effective veto power. If you fight me, you'll lose. If you work with me, everyone profits. Bradley's phone was still out, his face illuminated by the screen's glow. Emma, Jesus. Your portfolio companies. You own pieces of Morrison competitors. 3 of them. That's a conflict of interest. It's called diversification, I said. And yes, I've built positions in several companies in the luxury development space. None of it violates our investment agreement or fiduciary duties. I've actually been quite careful about that. My father leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Why? The word came out broken. Why not tell us? Why let us believe you were nothing? Because you wanted to believe it, I said simply. It was easier for you to have a disappointing daughter than to confront the possibility that you'd misjudged someone so fundamentally. And honestly, it was easier for me too. Once I stopped trying to prove myself to you, I could focus on actually building something. Linda knew, my mother said. She knew what you were capable of. That's why she left you everything. Linda knew because she asked questions and listened to answers. She treated me like a person, not a problem to be solved. When I told her about my work, she didn't dismiss it. She advised me, connected me with her contacts, taught me everything she'd learned. She was family in ways none of you ever were. The words landed like stones in still water, ripples of impact spreading across faces. Vanessa spoke quietly. The Toronto project. You approved our budget increase last quarter. We never knew where that additional capital came from. It came from me, I confirmed. You needed $23 million to secure the premium location. The numbers justified it, so I authorized the increase through the investment structure. You did good work on that deal, Vanessa. The first truly good work I've seen you do without Dad's hand on your shoulder. She looked at me, something like understanding flickering across her face. You could have told me. I would have. What? Listened? Respected me? Treated me like an equal? I shook my head. You had every opportunity to do that without knowing my net worth. You chose condescension instead. My father stood slowly as if he'd aged a decade in the last 30 minutes. Monday's board meeting. What should we expect? Professionalism, I said. This is business, not personal. I'll present a strategic review, we'll discuss operational improvements, and we'll establish new governance protocols. Bring your best thinking. Leave your egos at the door. And tonight, my mother asked. What happens now? I stood, smoothing my dress. Now I'm going home. Thank you for dinner. The duck was excellent. Emma, wait, my father said. We need to talk about this. Really talk. We will, I agreed. Monday morning, 9 a.m. in the boardroom. Bring Vanessa and your Siva. Leave everyone else. I collected my coat from the foyer, aware of the procession following me. My parents, my sister, various aunts and uncles and cousins, all trailing like confused disciples. At the door I paused. One more thing, I said. Bradley, your firm handles some investment portfolios for Morrison Luxury Development's executive retirement accounts, correct? He nodded mutely. You'll receive notice Monday that those accounts are being transferred to different management. Nothing personal, just business. When you make $2.3 million in a single day instead of a single year, we can discuss portfolio management strategies. I opened the door to November cold and clear stars. Behind me, 23 people stood in stunned silence, their entire understanding of reality reorganized in less than an hour. "Oh," I said, turning back one last time. "Mother, about your suggestion that I come work for Morrison Luxury Developments in an administrative capacity? I'll take that under advisement. Though technically, as the primary investor, I suppose I already work for the company. Just not in the way you imagined." I left them there, framed in golden light from the chandelier, their expressions ranging from shock to calculation to something that might have been respect, if they'd ever learned what that looked like. My phone buzzed as I reached my car, a Tesla Model S Plaid that I'd bought with the profits from a pharmaceutical investment, parked between my father's Bentley and Bradley's Porsche. A text from James Chin. "Security protocols implemented. Monday's board package ready for your review. Legal confirms your position is unassailable. Happy Thanksgiving." I smiled, started the engine and drove away from the Morrison estate. In my rearview mirror, I watched the figures in the doorway gradually disperse, returning to their disrupted holiday, their comfortable assumptions shattered like the crystal stemware they'd been drinking from. Monday would be interesting. The board meeting would be professional but pointed. Vanessa would probably cry. My father would certainly rage. My mother would deploy every social manipulation tactic she'd ever learned. But none of it would matter because the numbers didn't lie, the contracts were ironclad, and Emma Morrison, sociology degree, data entry job, family disappointment, controlled the future of Morrison Luxury Developments. Aunt Linda would have been proud. I merged onto the highway, already composing the agenda for Monday's meeting in my head. The Thanksgiving I'd hoped for, acknowledgement, respect, basic family decency, had never materialized. But I'd gotten something better. The look on their faces when they realized that their target for condescension had been their savior all along. My phone rang again. I smiled when I saw the name. "Happy Thanksgiving, Rebecca. And before you panic, you're not in trouble. But we do need to discuss social engineering awareness. Vanessa Morrison is very good at making friends." "I'm so sorry, Ms. Morrison. I never thought." "I know. That's why we have security protocols. But this is a teaching moment. Family is often the biggest security risk. Remember that." I ended the call and drove through the darkness, leaving behind the crystal chandeliers and the carefully curated lives of people who'd mistaken pedigree for competence, inheritance for achievement, and family name for personal worth. They'd learn better. Starting Monday. And I'd be there in their boardroom in my tailored suit, with my $2.3 billion portfolio and my sociology degree, to teach them exactly what they'd been too arrogant to see. That the most dangerous person in any room is the one everyone underestimates. The person they'd dismissed. The person they'd mocked. The person who'd been writing their paychecks for 3 years while they congratulated themselves on their business acumen. I smiled as the city lights appeared on the horizon, bright and beautiful and full of possibilities that my family would never understand. They'd called me a pretender. Turned out I was just better at the game than they'd ever be.